From the moment Iron Man snapped his fingers in 2019, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been destroying itself. For more than a decade leading up to the snap, Marvel dominated cinema, grossing over $29.8 billion globally to become one of the biggest movie franchises the world has ever seen. But ever since, Marvel has had one failure after another, and the MCU has become so bad that it might have to be scrapped and restarted like the DC Extended Universe. In this video, we'll explore why that happened, what Marvel forgot, and what they could do to save the franchise. In May 2008, Marvel released the first film in what would become known as Phase 1 of the MCU, Iron Man. There wasn't a big plan for a cinematic universe when Iron Man came out beyond a cameo from Nick Fury in the post-credits scene.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
The idea for the MCU only came about after Iron Man did much better at the box office than anyone expected. Then Kevin Feige rolled out his grand plan for a cinematic universe, a series of films featuring Marvel's most popular superheroes, leading to an Avengers team-up movie. As a comic fan, I was excited, and they didn't disappoint me. Even though some of the movies like Thor: The Dark World weren't as well received, the first three phases worked for a few reasons. All the films focused on one or more people from a central group of characters, the Avengers, and built a world around them. All the characters, but especially the two who would become the leaders of the Avengers, Iron Man and Captain America, were fleshed out characters who went on a journey. For example, after being kidnapped by terrorists, Tony Stark went from a wealthy, selfish billionaire playboy to a guy racked with guilt for the damage his weapons had done.
I saw young Americans killed by the very weapons I created to defend them and protect them.
Ready to sacrifice himself to save the world. Steve Rogers started ready to sacrifice himself, but he was just a skinny kid who wasn't strong enough to make a difference.
We are going to win this war because we have the best men.
He became a superhero when his physical strength matched his inner character. Stark and Rogers kept on changing as the movies progressed. The once rebellious Stark agreed with the government's plan to control the Avengers. The ex-soldier Rogers went the other way, losing his trust in authority and becoming the rebel Stark once was. Nearly all the characters in the first three phases were interesting. Some had extensive backstories like the Hulk or Thor. Others were more mysterious but still engaging, like Hawkeye and Black Widow.
We're still friends, right?
They all mattered to us, and they all had stories that fit together. The last and most important part of the old Marvel puzzle was producer Kevin Feige. Feige was at the heart of every installment. He acted like a TV series showrunner, ensuring each film added to the others and that they all led to a big phase finale that always felt like a cinematic event, an Avengers movie. At the end of Phase 3, their biggest finale was the epic two-parter Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame.
Assemble.
By the end of Endgame, Stark and Rogers' stories had run their course. They both made a sacrifice. Rogers grew old with the woman he loved, Stark didn't. They weren't the only Avengers to leave the franchise, and it felt like the end. Before Endgame came out, Feige said the MCU would never look the same again. He was right. It would have always been hard to start over after so many popular characters left the franchise. In hindsight, Phase 4 should have been more straightforward. It should have been about how the new Avengers team came together, building up a fresh team of heroes we could grow to love, but that's not what they did. Instead, they went for quantity over quality. Phases 1 to 3 told 23 stories over 11 years. Phase 4 gave us 18 TV series and movies in just over 2 years. Most featured a range of new characters, and all those extra heroes and villains were hard to keep track of. Some of those stories, like Loki and Shang-Chi, were good. Some, like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, were not so good. That's nothing new. Marvel had its peaks and troughs before, but this time they made some almost unwatchable things like Eternals. Even Thor 2 wasn't unwatchable. The higher output led to thinner characters, even if they were ones we knew from before. For example, when the Falcon became the new Captain America, it felt more like a guy agonizing over a promotion than a superhero origin story. It also felt like there was too much. It's hard to know where Phase 4 ended and where Phase 5 began without looking it up. Officially, it was the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special, so there was no big event and no Avengers finale, just a bad joke about Kevin Bacon. In those 16 stories, films and the 9 so far from Phase 5, the cohesion of it being like one long series is gone. The small team of solid characters heading in a single direction has been replaced with a massive roster of superheroes with almost nothing to do with each other. For example, Shang-Chi was one of the best films in Phase 4 and one of the best characters, but he hasn't been mentioned since. We don't know what the Avengers are doing, we don't even know who they are. Do the Avengers even exist in the MCU at this point? The whole franchise has become a bit of a complicated mess. As well as becoming a big mess, the other problem is the MCU's decision to focus on the multiverse. At first, Kang the Conqueror was the next big bad. Kang is a multiverse villain in the comics, so telling stories that stretched across multiverses because of him looked like a good idea. It was a way to merge the characters Marvel got back when Disney bought Fox into the MCU. It started okay with Loki's first season, but then it hit a few snags, and they weren't all Marvel's fault. The fact is, the multiverse has been everywhere over the past few years. DC's The Flash TV show did the Multiverse Crisis and Infinite Earth story, dragging in versions of DC characters from old shows and movies before Marvel could. The Flash movie eventually went a similar way, and then there was Everything Everywhere All at Once, a multiverse movie so good it made me feel sorry for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. People have been getting multiverse fatigue. What hasn't helped is how they used Kang. At the end of Loki Series 1, the third story in Phase 4, we met Kang, or at least a variant of him, He Who Remains. This Kang variant tells us who Kang is and lays out the threat in black and white. Then, the first time we see him in action, he's beaten by Ant-Man. He's not all that scary. Compare that to the big bad in seasons 1 through 3, Thanos. You didn't even get a glimpse of him until the post-credit scene of the Avengers. From then until Infinity War, all we got were snippets to let us know he was controlling things behind the scenes. They kept who and what he was a mystery. Then, when we finally do see him in action, he beats up the Hulk.
We have a Hulk.
The Hulk! He was a scary, slow-burning threat that haunted the early phases. Then, Jonathan Majors, who played Kang, was arrested and fired by Marvel for reasons we don't need to discuss here. His character's inclusion in the planned Avengers finale, Avengers Kang Dynasty, was in jeopardy. Marvel was a mess. They were on the brink of destroying themselves after forgetting to run the phases like TV seasons. They'd stopped giving characters depth, creating too many characters that no one cares about. They'd forgotten about the glue that made phases 1 to 3 work, the Avengers, and their new big bad and multiverse plan wasn't working out in the middle of 2024. Marvel was in trouble, but is it the end? Well, maybe not. It looks like Marvel might have realized that things aren't going well and is trying to fix them. While not restarting completely like the DCEU, the sacking of Jonathan Majors has given them an excuse to dump the whole Kang and multiverse plan. Some of their most recent stories, like Loki Season 2, where Loki takes control of the timelines, effectively stopping Kang before he can start, and Deadpool and Wolverine, which make fun of the multiverse, look like Marvel is trying to wind the multiverse idea down. And they scrapped Avengers Kang Dynasty, instead bringing back the architects of Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, the Russo brothers, to direct 2 new Avengers films, Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. These movies will also see the return of Robert Downey Jr., not as Iron Man, but as the new big bad Dr. Doom. The jury's out on that. After that, it's rumored Kevin Feige will step down as producer after releasing a Marvel comic fan favorite, World War Hulk, as part of Phase 7. If he does, Marvel will hopefully pick someone to build on the new direction and make the MCU what it was. Maybe the Russos will be up for the job.